Corwell. Courtney.
Here.
Wasserman.
Here.
Smitty.
Here.
Schmidt.
Here.
Mazat. Here. And Fitzwater.
Here.
We need San Jose here.
We can go forward with public comment. So, at this time, if there's any member in the public that would like to speak on any item that's not on our agenda tonight, please come forward. At this time, I don't see anyone in the public wanting to come forward. So what I'd like to ask is council's opinion on how we proceed.
Governing board, governing board cannot act because you need to have all of the departments, one representative from each department is required to vote to mandate. And if we would like to, we could recess, and I could give people calls to see if they're on the way.
Yeah, if I may, Ken, I'll just address this to you. Did anyone call and check? Do we have confirmation of people? This is it's kind of embarrassing and frustrating, to tell you the truth.
It is most definitely embarrassing and frustrating. There was confirmation at the last meeting that people could attend, and no one has contacted me about not changing plans.
Okay, do we have a policy yet whereby we send out an email a few days before confirming attendance of other organizations? Do?
No, but sounds like a very good thing to do.
Okay, and we don't have a quorum for the governing board or the implementation board, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and we've got, obviously we have more to deal
I
here.
believe so, but let me take a look at the implementation board.
Okay, because if we have a quorum for the implementation board, we can take the various actions and at least take that off the agenda for next week.
Correct. So let me take a look.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, would it be possible to do item number 5, executive officer update? And maybe at the same time, somebody can try and contact our sales agent.
No action required yet.
Yep.
Why don't we do that? Mr. Schreiber, would you like to do your update and then we ask someone, possibly Elizabeth to call people from San Jose? You don't have that numbers yet.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. That's what we get the implementation board.
Yeah, let's have Vera sort out confirmation in terms of quorum for the implementation board. We have 5 members representing. Right, we've got 4 agencies, so you need 7 in total, and we have 5.
Mayor Tate, are you on the governing board for the implementation or both?
Not the implementation. I know that Rich is on vacation, so he won't be here. Rusty's only on the implementation.
So now we're one short on implementation board?
Yes.
The phone numbers for the San Jose council members are as follows: 535-4908 for Rose and 0910 for John. It's their offices.
You said 4910?
Yeah, 4910 and then 4908
This is
for
all
Rose.
the general for us.
And then,
Okay.
For the implementation board, this is the language out of section, for the record, 7D. Each member of the implementation board shall have one vote. The presence of at least 7 representatives shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. And so that means that you need an affirmative vote of at least 7 representatives for each action, is what this section says. So the implementation board can move forward if we have 7 people here. It doesn't matter which agency they're from. The governing board is different, you need at least 1 member from each agency. So I don't know what the count is for implementation.
It is 6.
It is
That's
6.
what we said, because we have.
There you go.
So,
No, I should.
implementation board members, please hold up your hand. Let's just make this easy, Rob. Implementation board.
You got 7.
We have 7. Implementation board present and accounted for. There we go. All right. Okay, Vera, if you'll please confirm this, and Mr. Schmidt, Vice Chair Schmidt is correct. Item number 5. San Jose, are we one short now in San Jose?
Mr. Hartwell is on the implementation board.
Still do not have 7
We still don't have the governing board members from San Jose.
Oh, yes, we haven't got it today. Yep. Oh, I see. She's wanting public comment. And I'm sure we can fit that in just a moment with your consent. Question for you, Vera, on implementation board items, like item number 2.
Yes.
The implementation board is to hear and vote on various things, and may or may not then be referred to the governing board. Do you see any reason why the implementation board can't do what it's being asked to do there?
One of the reasons I see is that unless you want to hear the staff report 2 times,
No.
because the governing board is going to have to hear the staff report and understand, listen to whatever public comment there may be on that item as well. So we were attempting to roll this into one item with the implementing board, one public hearing with the implementing board moving forward with recommendation first, and then the governing board, and combining the public comment, combining the staff report.
I appreciate the effort. We don't have a quorum of governing board people. We have 1 person to speak as far as public comment. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak on any item on the agenda? No. So we've got the public comment. What I would suggest to you, Chair of the governing board and fellow implementing board members here, is that we do as much as we can because we're here. And there's a couple of items here where the implementation board is supposed to listen, discuss, and then make a motion forward to the governing board. And I think we can do what we're here to do. And perhaps a couple more governing board members will stroll in.
Absolutely, and if that does not occur, we can take things out of order, and we can take item number 2 second, and we can work on just doing the implementation board recommendation that does not require a public hearing, and then we'll have to renotice a public hearing if the San Jose people are not, governing board members are not here.
Sure.
We'll have to spend the money to renotice it, so the public can redo that, so that that would probably have to be another regular board meeting.
Sure. But if we do anything or don't do anything today, we still got to do all that.
But it would probably
So-
put it off for another month or 2 is what I'm telling you the consequences are, because we set this additional regular board meeting, if you recall, at our last meeting. And I don't know, I'm going to have to look where the next one is. I believe it is.
And Vera, I appreciate all that. But what I'm saying is whether we take action or don't take action as implementing board, it doesn't change
No.
going forward. So let's move ahead. Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, on the public comment to reopen for the 1 speaker.
Yes, it's reopened the public comment. Please come forward. You can start that one.
We have that, right?
I'm Shanae Kleinhaus with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. I'm thrilled to see this project moving forward. We've been stakeholders and partners and have been helping get other projects in other cities to mitigate for nitrogen emissions. You probably know now that Apple decided to voluntarily contribute, and we have helped convince them to do that. We're working with other cities as well. But today I have also a concern and a question really, which is how, if I remember correctly, the plan does not include a pesticide application of any kind, not herbicides, not rodenticides, not any other kind of pest control. And I just wanted to make sure that this is, that I read it right, because we've had some concerns recently brought up by members regarding rodenticides specifically and herbicide applications. And so I just wanted, if somebody can clarify that I'm correct in reading that the plan does not include this type of applications of any kind of pesticide really. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will provide a written update to both boards on the issue of pesticides. It is a reasonably complicated issue that I want to not venture out on without having checked with the state and the federal agencies to make sure that I have the restrictions and the conditions and the allowances. I will get back to you next week.
We'll get a report back to us.
All right, thank you.
Turn it over to our chair of the implementation board.
Thank you. Rose is not coming. We called her office, Johnny's office. Debbie is calling his cell number now. If Johnny shows up, that'll be represented from San Jose. It's my understanding then that the governing board will have what it needs. And bottom of the 7th score is what? Oh, good. Okay. He's on his way. So you will have a quorum necessary. Vera, can we just reverse? Let's on item number 2. Can the implementation board consider the recommendation of the governing board at this time? And then have the governing board do its thing, or do we need to be in that other order?
Well, also what you could do perhaps is start with item number 3.
Well, I understand that. I'm just asking about number 1 right now.
Oh, but number 1. I thought you said 2.
Oh, excuse me, number 2.
You could if you want to hear the staff report first.
No. So you want to go to number 3? Go to number 3.
I am hearing Mike real well. I don't hear anything you're saying. I don't know what the
Well, I'm
microphone's are.
asking, is there a button here?
Yes, on top, right there.
Where on top?
Turn it around, maybe it's going to
I'm
cover
sorry,
out
I
the
read it
older.
for a channel, obviously. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so over again, number 2, you would have to hear the staff report twice if the implementation board took that up, because the governing board needs to hear it as well.
Got it. So let's go to number 3. Well, we're going to number 3, everybody. It's the implementation board's action. It's entitled Request to San Fernando Valley Water District to assign ICF Jones and Stokes Professional Services Agreement, transfer unexpended funds to the Habitat Agency from various professional service agreements, and a transfer $86,300 compensatory fees for the Calabasas Creek Flood Protection Project to the Habitat Agency. And approve motion directing. Ken, are you making a report?
Very briefly, it was highlighted in the budget that the water district offered Lance Beer to provide $500,000 of future mitigation fees as an upfront payment as part of the effort to get the funding to the Habitat Agency off the ground and running. And the follow-up actions today are to move contracts from the district that are still in effect. Item 1B in the staff report will be taken up separately by Vera since it relates to my now former contract with the water district, but the funds coming over. So let me avoid that one. And essentially the actions are to transfer ICF Jones and Stokes contract and unexpended funds, and to transfer all their unencumbered yet unspent funds. This will get the money into the Habitat Agency account. An account has been set up with the County of Santa Clara in terms of where this money can be deposited. So this is all part of getting the implementation up and running. The one contract with Wildan Financial Services will stay with the water district. It's a small contract, $10,000. Notable amount of that has been spent, and we expect the rest of it to be spent in part today on the impact fee study So we don't see a need to transfer a very small amount of money, the complications of transferring.
Thank you, Ken, and everyone. We're on item 3, which has an A and a B. We're on 3A. A includes 1, 2, 3, 4 action items. Vera, can those all be taken together?
Yes, they may.
Thank you very much. And for anybody who's come to this organization a little later than perhaps others, before this organization existed, dollars needed to be spent on certain things, water district, PTA, et cetera, forward some dollars, advance some dollars, if you will. We're kind of settling up accounts now that we're an actual legitimate entity agency with a fund. And thank you all, say, for the advanced dollars, water district members down there. Thank you very much for helping us get along, and of course that's being credited to your fees going forward. So I'll look to committee implementation board members for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion to move items 1, 2, 3, and 4. Do I have a second?
Actually, sir, it is for 3A, B, and D. You cannot take, 3A, C, and D. You cannot take B. That will have to be by separate action.
I'm sorry, you're saying C and D. I got 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
3A,
Correct. I'm going for the staff report. Excuse me.
okay, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, Vera, was what I asked. They could be handled in one action.
Yes.
Actually, you could, but if you need a report on number 2, which is the LUPS agreement, I can give you a report separately if you just want to take it on paper.
Okay, so we are allowed to take agenda item 3A, action items 1, 2, 3, and 4 together. We have a motion on the floor to do so. I have a second here. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Okay, so that passes 3A, and now we have 3B. Ken, did you say this is coming from you or Vera?
3B is from Vera.
It is, and I think actually you probably just did that, but let me see here. There is money that is going to be left over from the land use planning services contract that the water district had for it was about $100,000 at the beginning of this year. And we think there's an estimated little bit over $20,000, but we need to confirm the amount that will be rolled over into Habitat Agency funding. Mr. Schreiber isn't speaking on this, and he's excluding himself from the consideration of this because this is the agreement under which he performs services for the startup of the agency, and part of that money may be used in this agreement as well. So,
Thank you.
with the agency.
Thank you very much. And again, we don't have anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this item. So it's 3B, and the suggested action is to approve the motion directing the executive officer to request the transfer of 86.3 from California Wildlife to Habitat Agency. Motion made. Got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none. Lazat? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Actually, if you can do a roll call vote, please. We have a new clerk who doesn't know all of you very well and who's on what board, so if you could please do that.
And this is implementation, right?
Yes, it
This is the implementation ones that you fill down this.
And so I'm sorry to ask this, do I need to call everybody's name if I know they're not here?
No,
I mean, okay. So,
just 1 second, Rob. Yes, Rob.
Just a point of clarity, I think the action that you just addressed is 3A2,
Yeah,
although we just discussed it as 3B.
3B,
So
it's
I want to make
3A2.
sure that we have
so
the
the
right
motion would be for
motion.
3A2.
Right.
And thank you, because the staff report has different numbering than the agenda does, so thank you for clarifying
it's
that.
this time. It's the agenda.
Correct.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just note that the agenda numbering is different in the agenda at the front.
Yeah.
In the staff report further back, that is the source of the confusion that we're hearing right now.
It is.
So probably going forward in the future, we probably want to make sure that we have one system that we stick with.
Correct.
Okay, so all that said, in the agenda, we had items 3A with actions 1, 2, 3, and 4. We had
It's 1, 3, and 4 is the first one with B also. And the second action that you are taking now is 3A2. It's the LUPS agreement.
Okay, So the motion, the vote we took before for the 4 items was really for 3 items.
It was for 4. It was for A1, A3, A4, and B. Okay? So let's clarify. And you're right, it's different numbering in the staff report.
Historical meeting for me. Okay, so now we are taking a vote on 3A2,
Correct.
which deals with LUPS, the Land Use Planning Services. Okay, motion maker.
Yes, I understood that from the beginning.
Thank you. Seconder.
I need a different second.
May I have a second? Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No. We are doing 3A2, which is the LUPS. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
I thought,
Oh, did you need a roll call of the implementation group? I know you checked off all the names before that we were present when you determined the quorum.
Except, are you Mr. Dennis?
John, you're on the government.
I'm wearing red and white stripes.
You're on the government board. John?
Yes.
On both. Okay. So he's on both. Okay. Now we want to go. No, we did the other one. We did 3.
On our agenda,
We did B.
we're back.
We're back to having 2. Okay. And now we have a quorum
Yes.
with the governing board returning. That was painful. We got through it.
So item 2 on the agenda, conduct a public hearing to consider adoption of an ordinance and resolution establishing development impact mitigation fees for land cover, nitrogen deposition, serpentine, burrowing out, wetland, temporary impact with endowment fee and plan preparation, cost recovery fee components. And I would like to have a staff report, please.
Introduced Bob Spencer, from Urban Economics. By a brief bit of background, Bob came on board in 2012 with Wildan Financial, which had done an earlier impact fee study. Had a staff member leave and another staff member change, and they hired Bob to pick up this particular issue. We are extremely pleased with the work that Bob has done. He has a very short PowerPoint and can answer any and all questions on the impact fee system.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Spencer, fascinating to be involved in this work. I'm going to give you just a short background on myself, introduction to the program, so you can get to the business of the hearing. Let's see if this works. Okay. I've been doing this work for 25 years now. When I say this work, I mean work under the Mitigation Fee Act. Passed in '89, about when I started my career. It's this statutory authority that enables you to act today to adopt the mitigation fees under the plan. I've probably done, 150 or 200 of these studies. And if I counted every city and county I've worked in, almost all in California, that I've worked in California, probably most of these counties would be shaded in. What I've done here is just show you the habitat plans I've worked on. And even there, I've been able to develop a good deal of experience starting in San Joaquin and working through issues like Contra Costa's 5-year update, which actually is a very interesting process to go through as you are starting. And I'm actually transferring some of the learning there to some of the final edits we did in the report over the last year to make it easier when the update process comes around. So that's who I am, and I built the Wildan office in Oakland for 10 years, and I've been on my own for the last 4 years now. And as Ken said, I've been working subcontracted with Wildan to this work. So today, just 3 quick things. The key Mitigation Fee Act findings that are embodied in the information in the plan and the report. I just want you to understand, how we justify these fees at a very high 50,000-foot level. I want to cover the fee structure because you may get specific questions as you're out in the public about how does this work. It's not the simplest fee schedule, but again at a very high level. And then about how the update process will work. For those remaining on the board over time, this will be coming back to a regular So, the Mitigation Fee Act, the three key findings that I focus on in my work, justifying and showing this the technical documentation for, all the way to the point if I ever thought this would get challenged, what would be my answer if there was a plaintiff's attorney on the other side. I'm always thinking to the worst case scenario here. You just have to do three things. You have to look at the need for the mitigation, what impacts is development causing. You have to then look at how we're going to use the fee revenues that you're going to collect from development. There has to be a connection. What the impact is has to be related to the use of those revenues. You can't just go off and spend it on something else. And then underneath that, what's the balance? There has to be some rough proportionality between those two. The amount, or however you want to quantify the impact on the one hand, and the amount of the fee on the other hand. There has to be some rough proportionality. So those three key points underlie the analysis that we did for the agency, the analysis behind the nexus study we have in the packet, and the references all the way back to the plan, the extensive documentation that is in the plan. And I'd say just in passing, these habitat plans have far more documentation on these issues than most of the work we do in this field. So I would feel very comfortable if I were in your shoes in terms of the backup you have to make these findings and adopting these things. So that's the Mitigation Fee Act in a nutshell. Now on the fee structure, second point today. This is right out of the plan. This graphic, this map, figure 9.1, as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, in chapter 9 of the plan. See my pointer works, okay. So everybody is going to pay a nitrogen deposition fee. It's in the scheme of exactions and impact fees in particular, it's minuscule, but not insignificant. And I'm sure for anyone in the development community, no fee is minuscule or insignificant, so I appreciate that. Relative to the other fees, it is quite small. It's paid on a trip generation basis. Every building permit, every development would pay this within the plan area. And then the majority of development will pay the land cover fee, and that's really the heart and soul of the fee side of the funding plan. The land development fee is projected to bring in by far the most revenue because it's so broadly based. It's based on 3 zones. And 3 zones represent impact, again, back to impact versus amount of the fee. So the fee is highest in Zone A, I believe, Ken, if I got that right, lowest in Zone C. So if you're out here in this light shaded area, that's Zone A. That's where the natural habitat is the most sensitive. You're going to pay the highest fee because your impact's the highest. Zone B is this agricultural areas in here, so land that's somewhat disturbed or an agricultural use now, somewhat less value as habitat, still some, pay lower fee. Then finally, Zone C you can't really see, but it's inside the urban areas here that are in gray. And Zone C is defined by vacant parcels that meet certain specific criteria. They have to be a certain size, and they have they're small parcels, 2 to 10 acres roughly. They have the least amount of habitat value to be the lowest fee. So that's the heart and soul of the funding program from the fee side. Now, also, if you affect these 3 sensitive areas, you will pay yet a 3rd fee on top of those first 2. And these get quite expensive, but it's because the areas are particularly sensitive. Again, back to the size of the impact and the fee. Serpentine grassland, probably aware of, extensive documentation about the sensitivity of those in the plan. Western burrowing now has its own fee. And then in the wetland area, there's about 6 different wetland categories, fresh, marshland, streams, et cetera, et cetera. And the fees vary somewhat by the category, but they all are generally wetland fees. And again, you would pay an additional fee if you touch those. The fees will look very high on the fee schedule because they are per acre. But when you implement the program, you find that actually in any one development project, typically I should say in general, very small areas are actually within these sensitive areas, particularly for wetlands, where the fee is particularly high on a per acre basis. You may only have 1/10 of an acre or, you know, 1/20th of an acre that's actually what's called jurisdictional wetlands. So although the fee looks high on the schedule, the implementation side of this, it actually ends up being quite a bit less, you know, per development project. So those are the fees. That's the fee structure. I should say slide one of the fee structure. One other slide here. The other part of the fee structure that's important to remember is that each of these fees has 3 very important components. The first is, you know, 89% of the revenue is going to go to the habitat plan costs, the 50-year term costs, I should say the fair share of those costs that are allocated to the development mitigation fees would pay for 89% of those revenues would pay for those costs. If you take the total budget of your plan, your 50-year plan, about 53% is funded by these fees. So that's, if anybody asks you, well, you know, are these fees paying the whole thing? No, they're only paying about half the total cost. Other half are coming from state grants, federal, other contributions, local, state, federal contributions. So by no means is development paying the full freight here. They are paying a fair share of those costs based on the mitigation costs as a percent of the total benefits provided by the plan. Again, well documented in the plan in our report. 10% of all your fee revenues are going to go into an endowment account. You've got to start saving for the future. You've got to provide an endowment to fund operations once the 50-year permit term is entered or once the plan is fully implemented. So we'll be building that over time. And then 1%, barely 1%, is to reimburse the local partners for their costs in the plan configuration. So that's the nuts and bolts of the fee structure. That was the second part of my presentation. And finally, to wrap up, there are going to be periodic fee adjustments as you know, costs are going to change. These fees are adopted based on the budget as it was developed. That's all in today's dollars. Today's dollars are probably not going to be worth the same tomorrow. And so every year there will be an annual inflation adjustment based on a land price index, and then that will cover the land acquisition component of the plan, and then a CPI index for everything else. So every year, automatic inflation adjustment won't require legislative action. Is that right, Clara? The annual adjustment, I think, is just an automatic. Yeah, I believe it's just that administrators commonly done that way. It's an administrative action. Every 2 years, the plan does have a provision to review the underlying costs, and you may make adjustments if warranted every 2 years. So that would be a legislative action if staff brought information to you suggesting that, hey, the inflation indices really are way out of whack with our local land prices or something like that. That might be a very common reason you might have that kind of 2-year adjustment. If the land market is going haywire, and at the same time it's not picked up in the inflation, which is more of a broad-based Bay Area index. And then the big lift, the heavy lift, is every 5 years. And this is coincides with the statutory requirement of the Mitigation Fee Act to review any fund balance you have and, in a sense, re-justify why you're collecting these fees every 5 years. So that's what we just finished doing at East Contra Costa. You go back and as we did East Contra Costa, you would tear apart every calculation from the budget, from the cost inputs that built the budget, to the numbers that built the fee calculation, and then you would take into account revenue collected to date, and you would re-benchmark the entire fee structure to the remaining costs and remaining anticipated development or allowed covered activities allowed under the rest of the permit term. So that's it for my presentation today. I can take questions now. Okay.
Any questions from members of the board?
I was curious in terms of the 5 years. So you say you tear that all down and basically reconstruct it. How extensive a process is that time-wise and cost-wise?
In East Contra Costa, it took, it was a rush job, but we did it in about 4 or 5 months. And the contract, again, I was teamed up with Wildan. Boy, what was the total? I'm gonna, I mean, let's say it was in the 30 to 50K range, something like that. it's not a light effort, but it's not a gigantic engineering effort either. And actually, it could be, depending upon the information that staff brings to the table and to what degree, what shape the records are in, it could vary. But that's a rough ballpark.
Just to tag on to that, the various habitat plans, especially in Northern California, exchange a lot of information. One of the lessons learned from East Contra Costa is in their plan, they talked about every 5 years doing an audit, small a audit. They had a particular property owner who was extremely upset and said, okay, I want the fee study to meet audit capital standards. And that was a much bigger effort than anything that East Contra Costa staff had anticipated. We have not used the word audit. We've used evaluation, but we've tried to stay away from anything that would lead us into whatever the audit, the big audit standards are, because it certainly led East Contra Costa into a much longer and more expensive process than we ever thought we would have to do.
The primary consideration, whenever you are going to be considering the fees, are going to be the cost of purchase of land and easements over land. So that is why, in particular, you need to take a look at this every few years, because as land prices don't rise and fall, you're going to need to account for that. And that would be the biggest issue in terms of the assessment of your fees is, can you actually buy the land that you need to buy for this plan for the money that you're bringing in? And so that'll be the largest consideration. The rest of it will be fairly constant because your staff costs are going to remain somewhat constant. They'll just go up minorly. It's a very small portion of the plan. And other costs, administration and other types of things are a very small portion. But it really is going to be land acquisition that will drive the amount of your fees and how we evaluate that.
On page 15 of the study report, you have these tables of 2.3 and 2.4. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I was just trying to better understand.
Look over your shoulder.
Yeah, sorry.
Refresh my.
Kept expecting some of the numbers to add up, and they didn't, so I'm hoping we can.
And which didn't add up?
I'm just trying to understand, right, this is non-serpentine, this is percentage of land needed for mitigation. I just was having trouble understanding how those related to the overall.
Well, I'd be happy, I mean, in the interest of time, I could work with you, I could stay and work offline. But the bottom line here, for those that want to look at page 15, the key point of 2.3 is that it establishes that fair share calculation that I was talking about.
Bob, can we get you your microphone?
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Table 2.3 establishes the fair share calculation. I should say the two tables together establish what share of the budget is allocated to the fee program. What we do is we take the entire budget of the plan and we say, okay, what piece of that is related to mitigation? And that's where at the bottom of table 2.4 you'll see the 57%, which gets us to eventually to a funding plan that is about 53% funded by the fee. So that's the point of the tables. If they don't add up, or they've certainly been checked numerous times, so I'd be very surprised if they don't, but I'd be happy to work with you. Clarify it. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other members?
Yeah, the question I had was a comment about the automatic inflation adjustment. I didn't see that in the study or in the resolution. Am I missing that somewhere?
I believe it's in the plan, but it's not an automatic. I believe we have to come back to the board. It's not automatic.
Oh, it is in the plan. There's an index cited for it. And interestingly, again, in East Contra Costa, their fees went down for a number of years because land costs had plummeted. And so their fees reflected that, and they actually declined. But there is an index that is cited in the plan.
Yeah, it's chapter 9 of the plan. It lays out how that would be done on an annual basis.
So as long as we're doing it yearly, then that's definitely, I just want to make sure you're adopting a resolution ordinance and continue your community.
You do, because it incorporates everything in chapter 9. The reason why we do come back to the board every couple of years, however, is that those automatic increases are not always valid. And so, for example, in the event that prices do go down, of property or values do go down, and fees should be less, you're automatically increasing when you shouldn't be. And so we are coming back periodically for that. I also wanted to make 2 additional comments, if I could. There is a typo in the proposed ordinance, and on page 2 in paragraph 3, there is the incorrect date for the Nexus study. It says it was the year 2003 instead of 2013. That will be corrected in the final version before you consider it in August. And also, I wanted to add that according to the clerk and Mr. Schreiber, there has been no correspondence received on this item.
Okay, thank you.
What was the date error?
The year is incorrect. It should be 2013 and not 2003. It's a typographical error. It's in the 3rd paragraph on page 2 of the proposed ordinance.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question last month. There was a question from the Santa Clara Open Space Authority about whether they could get any cost recovery for their attorney participation in preparing this plan. Do you have any feedback?
All of the partners, and of course, the Open Space Authority is not a partner, they're not a permanent recipient, but if you look at the partners, they have all contributed a very substantial amount of staff time, meeting rental time, and other costs over a long period of time. Those costs are not recaptured in the reimbursement under plan preparation. The plan preparation portion of the fee, the component, and then what comes back to the 6 partners reflects the actual cash put in the bank, essentially, to pay for consultants and other needs for preparing the plan. It does not reimburse their staff time or other expenses being incurred. So in that sense, there would be no basis to reimburse the Open Space Authority for their staff time, because all the other partners have put in a lot of legal and planning and other staff time.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I think it might be good to just close the loop with them and let them know about that. My other question was just whether the material, particularly the Wildan analysis, was on our website. I didn't have a chance to check myself.
Yes, it is.
Okay, any other questions from the members? Okay, at this time we will open the public hearing for the adoption of development impact fees in order to hear and consider all testimony by interested persons relating to the adoption of the fees. Is there any member of the public who wishes to come forward? No? At this time, close the public hearing and turn it over to the implementation board.
Thank you, Chair Tucker. Oops, we're back. There we go. Thank you, Chair Tucker. Implementation board members, at this time, our board will consider making a recommendation to the governing board on the adoption of development impact fees as follows. And there's a 1, 2, 3, there are 3 items. And is there any reporting we can start? We can just discuss that.
No, you can now proceed to consideration.
Thank you. Supervisor Lee?
If I'm permitted to ask a question at this time, even though I'm not a member of the implementation board, did I hear correctly that we've not had any correspondence on this item?
We've not had any correspondence related to this consideration. We have a lot of correspondence in developing the plan, and some correspondence on the final environmental impact report, certainly, and we don't not for this notice process.
We don't have any public comment today as well. My understanding is that the formal adoption is on the 15th of August, is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
And is that adoption by the implementation board, the governing board, both?
Only the governing board, sir.
So the implementation board is notwithstanding the fact that we're sitting here together and we've sort of started, is making this recommendation to the governing board
Correct.
as a separate legal.
That is all on fees.
I guess the question or concern that I want to raise is, have we done any outreach to the developer community? This is not an insignificant issue, and I'm sure it will be more significant to some than to others. And as much as it may seem like we're courting trouble here by suggesting that we do some outreach. I'd rather that we had the vigorous debate before action rather than after the action was taken. So does the developer world know that this is coming on August the 15th?
The development community has been involved for years now. I would say there are two areas concerned. Building Industry Association had policy concerns regarding the nitrogen deposition fee, and Building Industry Association is aware of this meeting, and that issue we've not submitted new concerns with that. The development community through Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce, Clara Chamber of Commerce, and other entities has been involved in this process. I would say, and perhaps San Jose council members want to add on to this, but the process of getting the plan approved by the San Jose City Council was rather long and rather difficult, and involved a lot of meetings and a lot of correspondence. And some of that certainly related to the value of the fees. And so I think there were a lot of opportunities, a lot of discussion, a lot of meeting attendance. And the overall sense is that with the additional information in the RAV document that was added at the request of San Jose, that people were having some point of comfort in terms of the plan. Also, the plan was modified in 2011 and 12 to remove some areas from fee requirements and to significantly reduce the fees. So in that sense also, the development community, I think, and property owners and others have received good responses in terms of, yes, we were heard and the fees went down and some areas were excluded, lots of changes were made.
Again, I want to be clear, I'm not offering criticism, and I'm not looking to find trouble where there isn't any. I'm just sitting here in a meeting in the middle of July at a new location at what is about to be the moment of decision, or at least prior to the moment of decision, being told that if I understood the data correctly, the total fees are not insignificant in terms of their impact over time, with zero correspondence and zero public comment. That just makes me nervous. So what I would like to respectfully suggest to the implementation board as it takes its action is that there be a direction to staff to simply reach out to interested parties and sort of remind them so that when action is taken on the 15th, and I anticipate taking action on the 15th, and I anticipate being an aye vote at that time, but that when action is taken, we then don't wake up the next morning and discover that there's a firestorm from the almost inevitable people who say you didn't tell us, we didn't know, and why didn't we? So I just don't want to take a step that is as significant as a successful progress of this organization without being absolutely sure. And I have staff here from my office, and I'm going to ask them to work with me and with the staff here as well to make sure that we'll reach out informally. But I don't want our informal outreach to be the substitute for what I think should be a formal effort. Again, I just think we're better off to make sure everybody's clear about what's in front of us, that the vote is one that's got plenty of sunshine, and then once we move forward, assuming we move forward on that date, that everybody feels good about the fact that anybody who wanted to had the opportunity to chime in at the appropriate time. So that's
I'm sure that can occur. For the record, I just want to say what did occur before this meeting.
Please.
We're required by law to publish notice twice in the paper, and our notice actually is a lot longer than it generally is. It included a link to the website where you could find the reports, the agenda, as well as the reports. And it also stated that they were available to review in the office of the clerk of the court. Additionally, we were required, and don't quote me on this, I believe it's 15 days before the meeting, to notify any interested parties who had stated, who told the agency we want notice. There are several, they were apparently notified by the clerk's office, received that kind of notice. And then we also posted the agenda in the manner that we were required to on the website, also on the buildings and everywhere else that we were required to do that. So we did meet the legal requirements for public notice, and it may just be that this has been vetted so much with the other agencies. I don't know that everyone is satisfied at this point, but we certainly respect your concerns and we'll do what we need to do in the interim.
And just to add on to that, I have a distribution list, And we're trying to keep the sort of the official packet notification and the broader distribution list as two categories. But I have a distribution list which has many names on it, including representatives from all the organizations you've identified as customer rights committee. They receive the agenda. They receive in bold print on the front page of the email this the date of the meeting, the location of the meeting, the new location, please, et cetera, et cetera. So that all went out to them also, and there was no feedback from Lisa.
Thank you. And having been involved with this since literally my first day in office.
Better day to be supervisor.
Thank you, Supervisor. The notices, the meetings, the emails, hundreds. Your growing email distribution list, Ken, that you have. The fees that we're talking about today, for the most part, have been public knowledge for a year, 2 years, have been 2 years, and I've had constituent after constituent, home builder, developer, property management company, the Association of Realtors, the Chambers of Commerce, etc., all come and say, okay, what about this property? What about this property? So we look it up to see if it's in zones, where's our representative? In zones A, B, or C,
Yeah.
each of those things and work through. And to my knowledge, none of those things in the last year has changed. Okay? The dollar amount's the same, the A, B's, and C's have changed, have not changed. So the dollar amounts, the A, B, C's. So for the last year, all these different organizations, individuals, et cetera, have been aware of it. And I think what we're doing now is, the cake's been made, now we're putting it in the oven, is where it is. I concur with Supervisor Simonian's concern, and I also know, Ken, the size of your email distribution list, which includes chambers and developers and home builders and individuals and all that have submitted over time. So we'll make sure to notice, as has been requested. Now, the action for the implementation board that we have before us, these 3 items, is to make a recommendation to the governing board. And the governing board will do what it does, and then that will be noticed and put out and broadly distributed. Good. Vera, one quick question, please. And again, items 1, 2, and 3. Are you taking in one motion? Or A, B, and C, or X, whatever we got?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we are looking at items 1, 2, and 3. What is it, Kat? Item 2? Agenda item 2?
Yes.
Agenda item 2. Do I have motion? Anybody from the public? No. Yes, John.
I'll make a motion to accept, but I also wanted to concur with my colleague Joe. I think I had personally some trouble finding this facility today, so and I think we definitely need to make sure, because I was told to be a 17555. I went to every single one of the buildings before I got here today, and that's why I'm waiting. And so I think it would be important for us to make sure that the communication is better, and I'm very willing to make the motion to accept, so I'm making that motion, but I definitely want there to be a more extensive outreach on the correct address of the meeting.
Thank you. And Ken, you did not, when you noticed this meeting and the agenda and the fees and all the rest, you did not receive any emails?
No, in fact, I may add, the only inquiries I get on fees are from property owners wanting to know when they can pay the fee because they've got a development hung up on.
I understand that, but for those that haven't been here through this process, you sent out a notice to your very large distribution list that this meeting would consider the fees.
Yes.
And you received no emails back in direct relation to this item.
Right, that's the agenda.
Okay, so whether be able to come here or not, Commissioner Campbell, come here or not, there was no even, this has been going on for so long.
No, I
And
totally
the numbers,
agree.
that's all the only reason I'm bringing it up. But we are glad you are here with us today. And the mayor of Morgan Hill hopes you enjoy this building. Thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passage unanimous.
Okay, so then we will move back to the governing board. Put your hats back on. And for the governing board purposes, we still, we have to, at this time, read and consider the public testimony, the recommendation of the implementation board, and the materials provided by staff, and consider the following actions. I'm going to read the following actions, which are: 1, accept the June 12th Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan Development Fee Nexus Study by Wildan Financial Services. Introduce the proposed ordinance establishing mitigation fees for new development with the geographical study area of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan, including fees for land cover, nitrogen disposition, serpentine, burrowing owl, wetland, temporary impact, and endowment fee component, and plan preparation cost recovered fee component, mitigation fees for adoption on August 15, 2013, and 3, schedule the proposed resolution setting the amount of the mitigation fees for adoption on August 15th. To the governing board. Any discussion? And can I have a motion of acceptance? Are there any?
Motion to accept. Second.
I have a motion by Member Campbell, second by Mayor Tate. All those in favor?
Actually, excuse me, because this involves the vote on the fee, can you please take a voice, roll call vote?
Roll call vote,
And
please.
Madam Chair, before we begin, if I could is the motion now on all 3 items or on just one? Just so we're clear.
I heard all of them.
So it is to accept, introduce, and consider as identified in 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Governing
Governing board.
Ariana, Tucker,
Here, yes.
Constantine, Kate,
Aye.
Ferrera, Canis,
Aye.
Wasserman,
Aye.
Smitty.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Back to our agenda. We are now on item 4, I believe.
I'm going to suggest that we make this Odyssey-like tour through the agenda, that we go back and dispose of item 1, the minutes, only because I'm concerned we'll finish the meeting and not do it, and then have to go back on it.
Okay. Item 1, approve the June 20th, 2013 joint special implementation and governing board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second. Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Now back to item 4 on our agenda. Item 4 is discussion of desired qualifications for future executive officer recruitment. Recommended action is recommended the governing board and implementation board review and discuss the information in the staff report and provide direction to staff regarding desired qualifications for an executive officer in preparation for the future recruitment of an executive officer. And can be on the report.
Yes, I took the staff report and did a little bit of reorganization in it, and there's a copy of what I'm looking at the places, and also some copies of the side cases. At the last meeting, there was a brief discussion about preparation of an RFP for the executive officer position. It actually was a miscommunication. We have not prepared any type of outreach documents on this position, on the executive officer position. And the critical part of this really is to start with today, with the discussion of some of the issues related to this position, so we can start between this meeting and August to start putting together a job description and outreach process. So I've identified in the staff report 7 topics, and these are things that have occurred to me that I think will help shape the job description and the outreach process, and that's where I suggest we start. Because I think those topics will then help inform us of how to look at the list of skills that was developed in 2011 when there was an effort that was unsuccessful to recruit for a executive officer in training type position. The next steps after today will be to come back in August, and then the objective from my standpoint would be to try to be ready by later in September to go out in some type of recruitment process. Recruitment process, October, November, with the holidays, everything sort of grinds down, but that we would try to be ready to do some interviewing not long after the first of the year. That would be ideally. It's a lot of lead time. At the same time, I note later on an assumption, which is that the first time around for a very senior position in the recruitment process often is not successful. Probably unsuccessful more often than it's successful. And that's an issue of thin application pool usually. And so a lot of times it takes a second or even a third outreach effort. So hopefully by January we'll be talking to people. If we get it right, we get somebody, we can then work out a timing on that. Very briefly, the 7 topics that I would suggest we look at: time frame, in terms of the position, the document of the position. And my observation is that I think we're looking for somebody that will be comfortable being around for 3 years or longer. Again, I'm going to be leaving by next June. We need stability. We need somebody who's going to be around for a while as this agency keeps getting up and running. The amount of work time is clearly a full-time position from my standpoint. And it's only doable, I think, at a full-time position because there will be other resources that are in the budget that will help the executive officer both on small issues, of which there seems to be a never-ending stream of them, and larger issues. And so there's money allocated in the budget that would be available for the latter part of this budget year, and then the assumption is in the future. Probably getting a person with the skill set and experience to do an executive officer position is $175 to $200 an hour. And that may be reduced down, or negotiated down a little bit, but probably not a lot, because you're looking at somebody who has a lot of value for a particular organization. By way of comparison, my contract is for $150,000. If I take my the hours I put in, it is $85 an hour. And for that, then my company pays both sides of Social Security and all the health care and everything else. So there's a big gap between where we are now and going out, I think, and recruiting from a consulting company. That doesn't say that there may not be other ways of doing the contract, but you'd be looking most likely at an individual like myself who is in maybe a second part of the career and would not have the overhead that a larger consulting company would bring to the process. A staff position raises other issues. One is that county staff, management staff, advised me to probably figure 40% for the overhead, the non-salary costs that have to be added in. So you have a salary position, but then you add a bunch more into it. And the other is there will need to be a structure for recruiting and hiring, personnel policies, and all of that. And almost undoubtedly, you will want to contract with one of the partners for that. In the 2011 process, we were looking for general skills. We weren't looking for specific skills in negotiating acquisition of property, negotiation skills. We weren't looking for that level of detail because the feeling was that this was a broader, more general position that you would then hire more detailed skills to assist. I think that is still a good way to go because certainly my experience is that any particular week, much less day, an awful lot of things from a wide variety of areas come through the email, through the corporate sector. The 6th item I note is land use planning and conservation biology. And all the time I spent on the habitat plan, it has become obvious to me that land use planners in general know very little about conservation biology. They almost never deal with it. And my experience in Palo Alto, they almost never deal with it. And I talked to colleagues, they almost never deal with it. And conservation biologists know even less about land use planning in general. So the idea of how land use policy is developed in the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and how all that works, by and large, conservation biologists, and we talk about it, it just sort of goes past them. This is another universe out there somewhere. So, and yet the habitat plan implementation is going to be intricately linked with the land use process. We have to have an efficient application review, permit issuance process. And a lot of the questions coming up now are how do we apply the habitat plan to this particular type of development application? And so my recommendation is that the executive officer needs a good skill set, some good experience with land use planning, because that issue will continue to boil along as plan implementation occurs. I'm probably going to be the case. And I think John Kopchak and East Contra Costa and I talked about this, and Lauren Clark and Placer. And they're of the same view that the land use issues just keep coming and coming and coming. And if you don't understand what a use permit is versus a zoning ordinance or subdivision or whatever else is, you're sort of behind the curve in trying to deal with those issues. And then the last issue.
Can I quickly ask,
Yeah.
so you're suggesting that if the menu is that we'd like to have all those skills, this should be the most element?
I think the person, my recommendation would be that the person you're looking for should have a good working knowledge of land use planning and not just the policy development, but how development gets approved, how you process development, what people face at the permit counter, how you structure conditions, how the environmental review process works for specific development. And then the last one, I'll get this back to the usual. The first critical skill we identified in 2011 was familiarity with Santa Clara County natural resources, land use issues, organizations involved in the habitat plan and decision-making process in related matters. The one candidate that rose to the surface is probably the only qualified candidate was from Southern California. And so one of the issues we need to think about is how valuable and how much attention do you want to place on somebody who really understands Santa Clara County, and to what extent, if someone is coming from outside the county, how you evaluate their ability to pick up those skills and familiarity, etc. There's no right answer for that one, but I think to broaden the outreach process to the extent possible, you will be wanting to look at a broad geographic area of teams. You will get candidates who don't have a familiarity with Santa Clara County. The staff report includes the 12 critical skills and the 4 desired skills that were developed in 2011. And that was a rather intense process for managing the team. We actually used a facilitator to help some of that discussion, try to help organize it. I think it's an interesting list, and I think after the bigger topics, coming back and looking at those skills will be informative in terms of how you think this position. And again, it's not decision time today. This is starting to shape things. We intend to come back in August for a further discussion. Take the day, start the planning, kind of shape it, and then keep moving there for outreach. And again, I will note the issue that's not in the staff report, which is, should we be looking for a organization or a service that will facilitate the outreach process? And that's, there's probably a lot to be said for doing that. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Sure. I guess I'm not yet convinced about the priority of land use planning for this position, although I'm open to being persuaded. I've certainly been very impressed kind of with all the work you've done over the years, but maybe quixotic hope is in the future this job will be less politicized than you often necessarily see in land use planning process. The process itself is always messy. I'm hoping that most of that messiness will stay with the cities and the county, and it'll be relatively simplified when you're dealing with the habitat aspects of it. So, okay, look at the land cover, and are there any special habitats there, and you pay a fee. Maybe I'm being ridiculous about that, but that was my one thought. Second thought was, regardless of whether or not we see that, I don't think we need to make Santa Clara County experience a really top priority, especially since this area is attractive, definitely across the state. And the third thought was, in the staff report, it mentions, this is, page 3, at the bottom it says, for example, there's no mention of land acquisition, negotiating skills, or land management skills. And again, in my vision, which could be totally wrong, was that those skills would be really important in this organization, especially because we're talking increasingly about having conservation easements instead of just buying land for fee. So that's going to involve a lot of negotiating with people, probably on an ongoing basis. So if you want to react to that.
Just I'll acknowledge my own bias, being a land use planner for over 40 years, and I said bias in that regard. I, again, talk to colleagues in other jurisdictions and the conclusion I've reached is one that has evolved over the last few years in terms of, from the conservation biologist standpoint, the major lack of understanding, which oftentimes causes a lot of problems. But again, it's, and over time, it may well be less, although land use issues developers are very creative people. They keep coming along with new ideas and new ways of addressing issues and new questions. And certainly I think in the first year or two, we spend a lot of time, again, quoting John Kopchak and East Compton Council, doing workarounds. As detailed as the plan is, we keep getting confronted with land use situations that aren't addressed in the plan. And you need to try to figure out how they fit into the plan.
Thank you. Just to give you the lawyer's perspective a little bit in terms of working on the plan for now almost 10 years, I think that one of the things that whoever takes over this position is going to need to do is be able to work very, very cooperatively with local partner staff who's been working on this plan. The staff that's been working on this plan gets along extremely well. We have our disagreements, but they get resolved very amicably. And that's one of the reasons why the plan is here today, is that we have so many jurisdictions and so many different interests involved in this plan. And yet, we've been able to bring this to fruition. The new person should not be someone who doesn't work well with that existing group. We have an amazing group of people who, by the way, have phenomenal planning talent on your management team there that really should continue through this. And so my second comment is, I think that the one thing that I have not seen over the years, because it has not been necessary to this plan coming to fruition, is the land acquisition negotiation skills. And that also includes negotiation skills and knowing where grant money comes from. And so we've done a limited amount of the grant work, but also the land acquisition. That's really a talent that we're going to have to pull in here. You do have very, very talented local planners from the 4 land use jurisdictions who are on this board. We have biologists under contract. There are a number of things, but that's the hole that I'm seeing right now that needs to be filled with all of that. And again, the cooperative relationship with local partner staff is incredibly vital. I don't think this plan would have gotten anywhere near where it is without that having occurred. But that's just my observation, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Personally, I do feel that we need an outside service. I was reading this, I actually read it several times, and it just seems, I come from a corporate world, a Fortune 500 company, it just seems like a very high-level person, and in that regard, we always use an outside service. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Absolutely agree. They know how to find these people. We don't.
Thank you, Ken. I was going to say the same thing. You mentioned, Ken, when you started speaking, and I apologize for having to step out and come back in, that you don't know what the cost for that is. So I wouldn't be interested in that information coming back. I'm sure it's a percentage of the salary of the individual that's placed, whether it be 1 or 2 years worth of salary. But those are experts. You talk about what expertise is needed in your job. Those are experts in getting the word out to the right circles of people with the skills once we give them the critical skills, as you entitled this paper, to do that. One of the committees I sit on is the Pajaro River Valley Water Flood Shed Protection. Something, I still don't know the whole thing, but there's...
It's another opportunity for me to say better than me.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And there's a woman there who, on behalf of the district, has been acquiring land and conservation easements for flood zones and negotiating deals with the property owners, be they farmers or ranchers, and allowing for one house and a location, and been doing all that stuff. And there's so many different possibilities where people with many of these skills exist, and they can learn other skills. And you never really know there how people get along. You know, some people are great 15-minute interviews. Some people are great resume writers. Okay, so you do the best you can as far as everybody getting along. I'm glad to hear you like the team so much, that's super. But I concur with Mayor Tate and the chair about the use of a headhunter. Have a professional do what a professional is meant to do to give us the broadest spectrum. And then I would give that headhunter marching orders where they go through and reduce the number of people and perhaps bring the government implementation board, joint board meeting, the top 5 or 6, that type of thing would work towards it. But what concerns me a little bit is the tick-tock of the time going by. And so we need to get on that. I don't know what action, Madam Chair, you really need. This is a discussion. And I think we need to give some sort of specific direction perhaps at the next meeting. And you can come
what
back.
I would intend to do, following up on the comments, is to talk to the open space authority, because I'm quite sure they use it. 99% sure they use a firm in their recruitment process. And I'm not sure what the process was for your position, and whether there was a firm involved for the county department or director. But I'll do some outreach, find out some firms and find out some costs. And
For the parks, they just have to go like this, take people. And whoever answers, we offer them the job.
Except I know it took a long
No,
time.
he's the finest in the nation.
It took a long time to fill that position, and that's one of my angst about.
Also check with Luke Leon, the county has an entity or two they work with to fill high-level positions.
There is also a very good headhunter who has done. There's also a very good headhunter who has done the recruitments for the last several years for the Peninsula Regional Open Space Authority as well as East Bay. And those are similar skill sets to what you're looking for also. So I would give the name to Ken as well.
Thank you. But very key in there, and I think Commissioner Smith brought it up, very key in there is someone who can negotiate. The lion's share of our fees are going to the acquisition of property. And you need to have someone who can go in there and negotiate hardball, very discerning on what this property is, and also determine the value of the land that they're acquiring. That's what this is all key about, is allowing development over here for protection of open space and endangered species over here. We want to make sure the dollar we spend gets us as much of what we're looking to preserve as possible.
Is this on?
You're right.
One? Thank you. I guess I agree with Brian with regard to the plan management and negotiation skills. And I want to say I also agree with Ken with regard to the land use planning. I don't know that needs to be the be-all and end-all, but I think someone absolutely has to understand how this all works. Even if, by the time it comes to the executive director, a lot of it's done. I think understanding how developers have got where they've got, what issues they're facing, I think is going to be part of when it comes to the management skills. Since we're talking about a recruiter, I tend to agree. Does that mean we've made a decision, contract versus the other hiring a staff person? And I guess I have a question for Ken. When you say hiring a staff person, when I come over to the second, page 3, you say, development of an agreement for one of the partners to host this position. So when you talk about staff, are you talking about one of the partners basically creating a staff position, and then that being the co-curricular director?
My sense is that probably be the only way to do it. I don't think it would be at all expeditious for the Habitat Agency to create the support structure in terms of personnel, somebody with personnel responsibilities, and all of the other support tasks for actually going out and recruiting and then salary and getting a position and et cetera, et cetera. It just strikes me that a public agency has considerable resources that are available in all sorts of different areas that go into that. And I think for the Habitat Agency to try to duplicate that would be extremely difficult. And at the same time, I am sensitive to the fact that this is an area, if you mess up, can get really bad and really expensive. if something isn't done right in terms of discrimination policies and promotion policies and salary, all that sort of stuff is out there, and the people who really know that are experts in that area rather than generalists who sort of pick up pieces. So my sense is that the easiest way, the best way, and probably the safest way is to have one of the partners essentially agree on a contract with the habitat agency to create a position and essentially provide that support for it in terms of all of those different policy issues, legal issues, tax reporting issues, etc.
But, so are you saying that one of the agencies creates a subset of, say, planning, sets aside someone as an executive director or the city manager's office or the...
That would be one way to try to do it, is say somebody in the manager's office, county executive's office, or whatever, the general manager's office, would be a new position which would be created, which would be general manager or executive officer of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, and then have an established salary and all of the different pieces that generally work within that position. If you want a staff position, but I think my experience is that trying to do that within the very lean structure of a habitat agency would be a very difficult thing to do, and I would be really concerned about missing something in that process that was actually like.
But how is that, who is that person an employee of?
That would have to be worked out in terms of how the agency relates to,
It could be worked out in a couple of different ways. It could be done contractually with an agency where they name who those people are and we pay them whatever it is for that contract. Or it could be done through in-house who are hired specifically for that purpose. They may have, for example, a different compensation plan, a different benefit package, whatever that is. And there are, concerns, there are certain concerns with both of those methods. We can tell you about those depending on your interest level in that. I will say on the agenda today, though, is to talk about qualifications, and what we could do for next month for the implementation board who's actually in charge of hiring a new executive officer. It's their decision. I don't know if we do have a governing board item next month as well, which is the fees, so you'll both be here. We can agendize something where we can tell you what some of those options are, as well as discuss, a headhunting firm, for example, if you desire.
But so, on an outside person, so to speak, a contract, what is the plan call for with regard to staff to that person? Because I'm not understanding, Ken, what you're saying about the concerns about, discrimination and wages and salaries. Who are you speaking about? Are you speaking about the executive director or who the director hires?
No, it would be the executive officer, if he's the manager. It would be that position, and then the habitat agency may reach the point in terms of staff for having some in-house staff expertise, maybe the logical, financially justifiable way to do it. But certainly, if the idea is for one person, maybe a person and a half, one person and a half-time person as staff, that strikes me as a small amount of staffing for a very large amount of expertise and cost that would have to be borne to provide that support. But I think my sense is that there would be some way to contract with that. I don't think that's that unusual. There are people I know working at the county who are all under the county's procedures and salaries and everything else, and yet they're working for separate agencies. Laughton is an example, where it's not a county agency, even though I thought so for many decades. But it's not a county, no, it's not a county agency. Yes, but positions are in the structure, and there's a way for the LAFCO Commission to get paid for paying the cost of the county in having those positions and supporting those positions.
Thank you.
I guess if you're inviting me to speak, my sense as a public employee and one who's moved around a bit, I think some of the things that board members might want to consider as you take a look at this. I think if you go with a consulting firm, right, I think as Ken pointed out, it'll be expensive. You'll be working with, I would think that you're going to want to be involved. You want someone to help you select someone, right? And make sure you have the right person, so you want to be involved in that. You'd be working through a consulting firm to pick the right person that's working for them. So you want to think about that if you went that way. I think if you're going to bring someone in on an independent contract, such as you've done with Ken, my sense is you limit yourself. People that are essentially retired, for the most part, you know, you have fewer people with sort of background and experience that I've heard discussed here that would probably be willing to come with none of the other stuff that comes with an organization, you know, that provides benefits and some of those other things that most of the people that you've been talking with have been used to having. And so I think that what he's talking about, where you work something out with one of the partner organizations, I would think you would want to make sure as you're contracting with whichever agency you went with, that you felt comfortable that, you know, you got to make the hiring and firing decisions and work out. There's a lot of legal stuff related to all of that, but you wouldn't. I would suggest you just pick someone from some agency staff somewhere and have them work for you, but rather you would be involved in selecting that individual, directing the work and everything else. Much as I'm not as familiar, perhaps as you are, you know, on how that works. Perhaps that's a good example.
Thank you. Commissioner Schmidt?
Yeah, I was just wondering about Contra Costa County, their habitat plan, and maybe some others, San Joaquin or Riverside. What are the backgrounds of the people they have in charge? If that's relevant information.
Two observations. One is we found that every habitat plan has its own distinctive structure. East Contra Costa and San Joaquin, their staffing is embedded in the county. So the habitat agency staff is essentially one. It's part of the plan. You go to the planning department, you set off, you know, to the habitat agency. San Joaquin, there is a joint powers organization involving all the government agencies in San Joaquin County. It was up and running beforehand, and they had all of the structure, and the habitat agency was one more task for the GAC to take on. But going back to East Contra Costa, if John Kopchak needs advice on legal issues, he goes to the county council and does something like that. His paychecks come from the county of Contra Costa. His personnel policies are all Contra Costa based and implemented personnel policies.
Okay, well, we really probably should agendize this further because we're really supposed to be talking about our qualifications, and it seems to me this is something that really needs to be vetted out before we go forward on this. I don't know about the timing, but if we could put it on next agenda.
And what I will do for the next agenda, because I've done it before for other joint powers agencies, is discuss what an in-house would look like, perhaps. Because you can contract, the agency could contract with an in-house, or they could just, you know, establish it in a different manner as well. And, you know, there are concerns with are the employees at will or not, that kind of thing, because if the agency board can't stand, for example, the executive officer or the planner or whoever it is that they hired, you know, is that agency then stuck with that person and paying them because they can't get rid of them? So at will is a big consideration. Consideration of rolling them into the benefit packages of that agency, for example, whatever it may be. So I can give you a thumbnail sketch of what those considerations are, just so that you know what's going on.
All right. We have no action on this item. So then, did you get your questions answered as far as qualifications?
I think the objective of having an initial group discussion has been met, and you can definitely expect that this issue to be coming back to you on a regular basis in a number of, because that is a critical issue, and again, we need to think about the time to clock.
Thank you.
Sorry for one last thing twice here, but I think the distinction between the structure and the skills may be a little bit artificial here, because I think the skills that we're going to want in what I would call a lead person may vary depending on whether or not we've got a retired independent contractor as opposed to someone who is working inside a larger organization with whom we've contracted. And so, you know, the need for necessity, perhaps even of someone who's a generalist, if he or she is a standalone operator, is a little bit different than someone who may be more specialized, whether it was in land use or conservation biology issues, if that person has the ability to access folks from a larger organization of which they are a part, depending on the contractual relationship again. So, while I do think we need to stay focused on a conversation about who does this person look like, I think the answer to that question is inevitably tied to some judgments about what the structure is like as well. The two are not entirely separable.
Okay.
One more question or comment. Definitely, I think the comments you made, Mr. Schmidt, about the whole world of land management is going to be very important. The comment somebody just made about, I think we need to think about this individual and operating in a team, that there's going to be contractual services that are available, that whether it's land use experience or land management or negotiating, I think we need to be positioned what it is would be our best candidate, and then recognize that we're going to look at the full candidates that come in and then figure out what are the other pieces that we need to bring to the organization to support our success with that individual, and whether it's living in the county or the water district or as a standalone agency, where they're still going to have contractual services that will deliver a lot of the things that need to happen. So I'm kind of less about whether it's a land use planner or a biologist. I think they're both important of how we're going to succeed. We just need to recognize we're going to need other services. And so the one thing I didn't see on here was their ability to deal with procurement or kind of contractual, especially if it's going to be their own standalone person dealing with actually administering contracts and that sort of stuff. Because I think there's going to be a lot of this position in this organization.
Well, that's a good point. Actually, I just want to bring up, and I remember discussing this probably 3 years ago, maybe. At that time, when I refresh my memory, I thought that we were saying that this was actually going to be its own agency with its own office and its own support staff. So how did we kind of veer away from that?
Well, it is its own agency. It will have its own office once we get an agreement with Morgan Hill, and that should probably be August. But again, within the liaison group for these last 2 years, there's been the push and the pull between the need for resources and the need to clearly send a message that we're not creating new bureaucracy. And I think that was in part political, because there were people raising concern about creating new bureaucracy. And I think it was part reality in the sense that we have County Parks and Recreation, we have the Open Space Authority, we have good resources that can be drawn on, park maintenance and reserve system. I would guess 5 years from now, remember, when you actually have more land under, that those are going to be through contracts with parks, county parks, and the Open Space Authority. And the Habitat Agency will do very, very little in terms of direct responsibility for operating, maintaining land, other than monitoring the contracts. But it was this push and pull in the process. And so we started out this first year with no staff, all contracts. I think everybody probably would have agreed that we're going to have some staff. But the question is, what positions, how fast we move into that. And nobody in this whole process really tried, I think, to sit down and figure out by year 1, by year 2, how does that all play out. I mean, there's a cost model, but we're dealing with reality now in terms of resources and needs. I might add, within the management team, I would hope that Mayor Tate, that you do not let Jim Rowe hit in any type of retirement departure is absolutely critical. And for Gilroy, Stan Ketchum, who was a former retired San Jose staff person, again, please don't let him leave because he's so critical and he knows this information. It's a serious point in the sense that you have to anticipate staff turnover. And training will never end in this. In 50 years, permit 50 years worth of training. And that's reality. But for people like Jim and Stan, they are just marvelous. As well as staff, Joe and Andrew and others, but the point is that there will be staff turnover and there will be training, and trying to maintain a sense of cohesiveness is going to be, I think, an important expectation of the executive office. It doesn't happen accidentally. We've got great people, and that's really
Okay.
And I have one last question, and it's maybe for positioning for the next meeting, kind of around the question of contract and staff, and if the full-time staff is still contractual, is getting into ultimately our expectations of the executive director and the staff that are there. It's, down to the fundamental questions, are they going to be participating in CalPERS versus 457, or, those kinds of major decisions. As a small startup agency, I think we can't afford to kind of just slide into that. I think we need to be very deliberate about that. And so that also affects part of the decisions on is it contractual or staff.
Okay, so we will now move on to item 5, which is our executive officer update.
Thank you. This agenda item is not for any action. It's an item for me to provide information on things that have been going on, deal alerts, etc. As I noted, and there is a staff report, I noted that we had a meeting scheduled with the Corps of Engineers last week. We had a very good meeting on Wednesday afternoon with the Corps and with National Marine Fisheries Service. I think any number of people coming out of that have characterized it the same way. It was a productive working arrangement, a productive working meeting. People sitting around the table, identifying issues, and trying to figure out the best way to solve them. It was not people on either side of the table trying to negotiate something. It was people working together as a group of professionals, and it felt very, very good. It doesn't make the process easy, but it felt good in terms of where we're going on this. National Marine Fisheries Service, it's involved because some projects will impact listed steel, basically, listed fish. And so there will be a subset of the regional general plan, regional general permit that will end up going off for NMFS, National Marine Fisheries Service review. And so we try to figure out how to structure that, move it along, at the same time recognize that they have interest in just a subset of future applications. ICF is doing a lot of technical work. I think the next meeting is probably in about 2 months. ICF is drafting a biological assessment, I think it's called, but essentially it's the key document in allowing the Corps to make decisions. One of the other things that came up in the water permitting process, and it came up from Bob Spencer, there's nothing in the habitat plan that speaks to water's permitting. There's nothing. There's nothing in the cost model. There's just nothing. So what Bob noted was that there's no way to incorporate facilitation of water's permitting. And what I mean by that is the expectation is the habitat agency will take applications in, they will review the applications to make sure they meet the standards of the Corps, they will group them together, so they go to the Corps with here are 10 applications and here's a brief summary, and 2 of these need to go to NMFS because, and range from the simple to, you may have a concern to help the process. There's no resource for that. Right now we're operating on pre-habitat agency resources. We're operating from resources left over essentially from developing the plan. We had a budget for water's permitting, and that's being used. But once that is over, there is no resource. So we don't know what it's going to cost yet, but somewhere along the way, later this year, most likely early next year, we'll have enough information to come back to you and say, okay, to carry out the regional general permit process, it's going to take about X And we can maybe add that to the wetland permitting or something like that. Bob will help us figure out that. I don't think it's going to be a large amount of money, but again, it's not. So, one point. Second is on the state water boards. I attached a letter sent by the Northern California Conservation Planning Partners, and those that read very carefully the small print on the side of the page will realize that one of the agencies, one of the 9 that are listed is the Santa Clara Valley HCP and CCP. I've been involved in their organization literally since starting this back in late 2004. They've been extremely valuable. They have worked on the water, state water's permitting issues, pushing, pulling, prodding, whatever else. But I wanted you to be aware that our name is on that letterhead, and that what I do intend as the state board process moves forward is an indication they want to try to complete their permit guideline amendment process this calendar year, and I might know they've never met a schedule yet, so I have no confidence they'll meet this schedule. But the point is that what I would do is provide some type of letter to them on behalf of the agency, supporting the efforts that we talked about here in terms of trying to use the state board and the regional boards to address issues on a watershed basis and habitat conservation, using a habitat conservation plan. The new guidelines would do that. Getting guidelines adopted is step 1. Getting the local regional boards to use them is much more difficult than maybe with step 2, because the regional boards don't tend to listen to what the state board says. The state board adopts policies, and the general approach is, now you have 12 regional boards, and you folks go out and figure it out some way or another. And 5 years later, you're still trying to figure it out. So anyway, but it's a critical step to get at least the state going in the direction we want them to go. Third, Shawnee Kleinhauser and under Oral Communications noted that the Apple draft EIR, they have proposed a voluntary payment of $126,381.60 on the nitrogen deposition fee that would come to the Habitat Agency when they start that project. You have attached to the staff report my letter to the city of Cupertino, essentially saying thank you very much, and this really is a significant environmental impact. It's not it shouldn't be a voluntary measure, and in the future, make it a significant environmental impact. And I attached deliberately the letter from State Ben Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service from last November, which was spelled out in detail why this was a critical issue and it needed to be addressed in a critical way. And I'm trying to keep that letter out there as a good basis for other jurisdictions to say, oh yeah, well, this is why we're doing it. We got word from these 2 regulatory agencies that this is what they expect us to do.
And is that fee based on the plans?
Yeah, they use
So
the
they use the plan.
plan fee times trips. Bluntly, from Apple's standpoint, this is so small, it's around the year, probably $1 billion project. Cupertino staff called me after the letters from last November. The only agency that has paid any outreach back to me on the letters. Mountain View has since done that, but Cupertino staff called me. We had several conversations, and they basically reached the same conclusion that I did, which is that if they don't address it, they take a very large project and paint a bullseye on it, and somebody can file a lawsuit. And since Habitat Conservation Now, our environmental organization friends, have sent a letter saying, we're monitoring you, and not very veiled wording in terms of potentially a sequel lawsuit, Cupertino thought the best thing to do was to put the fee in. But again, the message there is this is a significant impact, and it should be in your EIRs that way, not voluntary payment. But thank you. And then lastly, we'll talk tomorrow, management team, about Habitat Agency logo and letterhead. We have a variety of suggestions on at least a logo format. So we'll probably bring that back to you for a critical design consideration decision in August. It's not the highest priority on my list, very honestly, but we will get it to you because we know you're eager to get into design issues. Supervisor Smitty smiles at me when I say that. That's not good.
It would be the most contentious debate.
That's my update. Any questions on those or anything else that's going on in the world? Really, that's that one.
questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any questions on it? Do we have any future agenda items, items by members of the board or implementation? No, so I would like to recap. We will be bringing back our fees. We will be bringing back our discussions about contract versus non-contract, and what was the third thing? Was there a third thing? No.
Oh, well, yes.
Anything else that comes to your attention?
Right, and I just may note, this is a new item on the agenda, it's patterned after the more hill agendas, and it does offer an opportunity to say, bring back anything that comes to mind, concern, whatever else. This is an opportunity to actually formalize giving staff this.
And I would like to request from staff that we do send out the email that reaffirms everybody's attending the meeting so that we can be assured to have a quorum. And with that, I will adjourn to the August 15th. We're adjourned. Sorry.
We did.